they've just announced Roberto Luongo is heading into the Canucks Ring of Honor on December the 14th.
Okay, really? Okay.
Versus
that's
Florida.
Disappointing for you.
It is, yeah.
Because I know you felt he deserved to have his number retired, which I wouldn't have a problem with if they made it a dual ceremony for the number 1. And there is precedent of this with the Montreal Canadiens and the number 16, Elmer Larkin, the pocket rocket, Henri Richard.
You'll get there eventually.
Kirk McLean, Roberto Luongo,
Yep.
the number 1 up to the Raptors dual ceremony. But Ring of Honor for Roberto Luongo. That sounds right. You can't retire his number.
Because of Kirk.
Well, because of Kirk, but also I think I would say, despite the success here, that he's more closely associated with another franchise.
Panthers.
Well, and we just talked about this with the Blackhawks. Remember, we saw those regulations set out by the Blackhawks that the player needs to be played the most amount of games in their career with Chicago.
I don't like that.
Well, but at least we've talked about this. At least there's some kind of standards. Like, why is Roberto Luongo in the Ring of Honor and not not retired?
I think when it comes to jersey retirements or the Ring of Honor, like a lot of it has to do, like sometimes you have no idea how popular a player is in another city. Stats don't do their popularity or justice, okay? What they mean to the franchise justice.
Right.
Like if you looked at Harold Snepps, and Harold, if you're watching out there, this is with all due respect, and he definitely belongs in the Ring of Honor.
Yep.
You look at his numbers, you probably think, well, why would that guy be in the Ring of Honor? But if you live in Vancouver, you get it. Of course he belongs there.
Right.
Yeah. Of course he does.
But what's the criteria, Don? Is it popularity? Is that why they're getting in?
Well, that's why I don't know if you can associate it with numbers. I don't think that's the way you do it. Roberto belongs there. He belongs in the Ring of Honor. And Kirk McLean's there as well. Kirk McLean is in the Ring of Honor as well.
8 years in Vancouver.
Right. But one's a Hall of Famer.
Right, who's more closely associated with another franchise.
But did he go into the Hall of Fame?
Let's not get into this argument because you know how I feel. I don't think Kirk McLean gets enough credit in this market for what he did versus Roberto Luongo.
But did he go into the Hall of Fame as a Panther or as a Canuck? They don't go in as they're not like baseball, right? I know baseball, you wear a hat.
With the hat.
So
yeah, and there was a big deal with Gary Carter, I believe, went in as an Expo versus a Met. Sometimes it causes a controversy.
Roberto leads the organization in every category as a goaltender.
And 8 years is significant. It's not like Donnie was only here 4 or 5 years. He was here 8 years. That's pretty significant.
Okay, well, here's another thing. Roberto had more help. And I'm not knocking Roberto Luongo for a second. He had more help than Kirk, certainly at the start. Right?
You're talking the teams he played for.
The teams that Kirk played for at first, when Pat Quinn took over, that was the first great trade.
Late 80s.
86, 87.
Yep.
The team that he started with was awful. These are the teams that were getting 7,000, 8,000 people at the Coliseum. Pat takes over, makes that trade with New Jersey. That was really the start of it. The Sundstrom trade. Greg Adams, which was just a steal of a deal. Greg Adams and Kirk McLean for Patrick Sundstrom.
Yep.
That was a great deal. Those teams, I'm not saying that they were world beaters, the Dave Nonis team, when they acquired Roberto Luongo. They were better than that team in the 80s. So Kirk's numbers aren't as good as they might have been had that team been better. They were awful. That's true. All due respect. But congratulations to Roberto Luongo. He's getting into the Ring of Honor.
Good for him. Not surprised, Donnie. But you talk about Florida, 11 years in Florida, 8 years in Vancouver. So you do
he's living there now.
Yeah, I know.
And here's the other thing is if you don't believe he is more closely associated with the Florida Panthers.
Yeah.
Right? He played there at the start of his career, drafted by the Islanders. Set up shop in Florida, came to Vancouver. And then at the end, 23, he's talking about his contract sucking because he wanted to go back to Florida. And he's still working there. He's more closely associated with the Panthers, in my opinion, than he is with the Canucks.
Yep.
Maybe not around here, but in the hockey world, yes. And again, that's not a knock at all.
But you ultimately now have you have 4 Hall of Fame members of the organization, one of which doesn't have their number retired. That's weird. Especially when one of those numbers that got retired, the guy behind you, Pavel Bure, only got retired after he went into the Hall of Fame. So that was
Okay, but then,
clearly
but
significant
now,
to the organization.
you are attaching standards to it, and I think sometimes I'll say it again. Sometimes it's just a feel. I don't think his number should be retired. I think he belongs in the Ring of Honor, which is an outstanding honor, by the way.
A big honor.
It's not a knock.
Big honor.
And again, hey, listen, Gary Smith wore number 1. Maybe a triple ceremony.
Stop.
Their first Hart Trophy candidate. People, I'm sorry, I know it happened before 2011, so it probably doesn't count. That he was a big deal here. I know there was a lot with Gary Smith. I'm just joking. But if Roberto Luongo has his number retired, number 1, it has to be a dual ceremony. It's not going to happen now. They're both in the Ring of Honor. We've had this argument before. I won. Let's.
The Canucks also announcing, by the way, December 14th, that night, the first 10,000 fans. And this looks pretty cool. First 10,000 fans will get a limited edition Roberto Luongo bobblehead. And the bobblehead actually that's a pretty good looking bobblehead.
Okay, so let me get back to the argument. Okay, we're gonna continue there. When you think Stanley Cup final, okay, the ultimate moment for any hockey player, who outperformed who? Now, Roberto came up with 2 shutouts in 2011. That's not what stands out.
No.
Kirk McLean, if they win Game 7 in New York, who's the most valuable player in those playoffs?
Okay, sure, but hold on. You said that Roberto had more help, right? In terms of a team.
At the start of his career.
Who had more help in the Stanley Cup final? Kirk or Roberto?
The Canucks were up 2-0. What are you talking about?
They didn't score.
They were up. They were up
score
3 times in the series.
Yes.
No, that's a very good point. For all the criticism,
Kirk got more run support in '94.
It was weird because Roberto, and maybe you could argue he might have been a Conn Smythe Trophy candidate as well. He had 2 shutouts. You forget that, but. This is so weird because Corey Schneider retires yesterday, and he's going to be on the show later this week, by the way. It all kind of fits this Ring of Honor news.
Yeah.
How many goaltenders who might have been a Conn Smythe Trophy candidate were replaced 2 times, justifiably so, in a Stanley Cup final?
Well,
he
Ryan,
got yanked twice in Boston.
Lost a game 8-1. He was horrible in Boston. But, Ryan, they won 2 low-scoring games in Games 1 and 2. Don't give me the run support thing, okay? They won 2 very low. He didn't have run support in Games 1 and 2, and they won.
Right, but I'm saying
his job is to stop the puck.
I'm saying
in high-scoring games and low-scoring games.
Totally. And by the way, I don't know of any goaltender in the history of the league has ever, when he's been bad, has been awful.
Horrible in
and
Boston.
when he's been good, has been really good more than Roberto Luongo. Like when Roberto melted down, it was a meltdown. It was harsh.
He was horrible.
My overall point stands that Kirk got more goals to help him out in '94.
Oh, different hockey back then. It was different hockey.
They won Games 1 and 2 low.
So Ryan, let me ask you this: How many players whose numbers are retired by franchises near the end of their tenure with that franchise said the words, "My contract sucks.
Okay,
I want out of here."
Well,
you could argue Pavel Bure maybe shouldn't be up there if that's the criteria.
Yeah,
that's the thing.
Bure electrified this audience like nobody, including the Vancouver audience like nobody, including Roberto Luongo. But how many? Like, my contract sucks. I want to go back.
For some reason, Pavel's exit gets glossed over by a lot of people, and Luongo's doesn't.
Again, it's a feel.
And saying to
rightly or wrongly.
And saying to Tim Thomas, you're not pumping my tires. Well, that wasn't very good. And I remember BMAC on 1040 absolutely ripped him for saying that. I'm sorry, Ryan. He did not do well in the Stanley Cup Finals. I'm sorry.
Well, again, it was strange because he did come up with 2 shutouts. We're repeating ourselves here, but in Boston, he looked nervous.
Yeah, in Boston, he just was not good in Boston at all.
Yeah,
they lit him up,
getting pulled.
Like I say, look how he looked in Chicago. Well, he gave up mass amount of goals in Chicago as well. Roberto did. Like I say, when he melted down,
we're going back there.
Down.
We're going back there. That 2011, they ended up winning that series against Chicago. 2009, and he had big trouble.
Yes.
Same with 2010.
Right
against Chicago, they eventually slayed the Dragon.
Yep.
But there's a lot, like there is with a lot of players, good and bad with Roberto Luongo.